Hello. How you guys are enjoying the breakfast? Good? I love it. I love the cheering in the room. Amazing. So, moving forward, we will just have one communiqué. In French, we say communiqué. Let's keep it bilingual, right? Yeah, so if you guys don't have this on your chest, on your head, anywhere you want to put it, it's okay. Will you mind please go on the registration table outside there and try to grab one? It's very important for the ICTC to honor you by offering you a badge. So please, if you don't have any badge on you, please, you can go on the registration table outside and then grab one. And of course, the breakfast is good. The Minister Marcy Ariane was amazing. But we have to move forward with our day, right? Wonderful discussion has coming forward. So I would like now have the honor first to present you what we are expecting today, right? We are having a lot of discussion. I hope you guys have the program. If not, you can find it on Eventbrite. You can still go on the Eventbrite and see the program of the day. But right now, we are moving forward to another part, a very important part of this day. The title is Gender Equity in Canada's Tech Ecosystem Discussion. Okay, the gender equity, it's so interesting. See, Mr. Nami was talking about the gender equity, and then the Honorable Minister Marcy, she also highlighted the fact that the gender equity is still a big battle, right? On essaie encore d'avoir une belle parité entre les femmes et les hommes dans le monde de l'entrepreneuriat et encore plus dans le monde de la technologie. It's still a big battle that we are all fighting, and that's why we are so happy to have ICTC joining us to build a strong equity, gender-based community. So right now, I will have to invite here on the stage two wonderful persons. It's going to be Alexandra Cuten and Marina Ivius, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Alexandra Cuten and Marina Ivius for the theme Gender Equity in Canada's Tech Ecosystem Discussion. Applause for them, please.
Good morning, and thank you, Eunice, for the warm welcome and introduction. It's a tough act to follow the minister, but we'll do our best. So my name is Alexandra, or Lexi for short. I'm the Chief Research Officer at ICTC, and presenting with me today will be my colleague Marina, who's sitting over there, and she's our Manager of Economics. We're going to talk a little bit about what the minister talked about at the end of her presentation, which is impact. And what we're going to share with you today is the evolution of the digital economy, how women play a role in it, and where we want to be, where we are aiming to go in the future. So that comprises of two main areas. The first part that we'll talk about today is gender equity in tech. And why I've put that as a comparative or competitive advantage is ultimately we're in an ecosystem where the labor market is still tight, the economy is changing, there's heavy, heavy competition. But gender equity ultimately is an economic imperative. It is plainly put good for business. It's not just an ethical thing to do. It's not the right thing to do necessarily, but it's ultimately just good for the economy. So that's what we're going to talk about in part one of this presentation. And part two, we're going to talk a bit about that impact. So if you're not familiar with ICTC, essentially we have two parts. We have our research and policy component, and we do research on things like gender equity in tech, transformative technologies, labor market evolution, sustainable economy, and much more. But increasingly, we also take that research and we work with our second part of the organization, which is capacity building, that uses those findings to create programs that fill a gap in the market. And that's what we've done with the Ambassador program, and Marina is going to talk a little bit about that impact. But before we start today, just by a show of hands, how many people in this room have graduated from some type of post-secondary, so college or university? Just put your hands up. And how many people took out student loans to pay for that college or university? Keep your hands up if you're still in that category. How many people today are still paying off those student loans? Right. So there's a lot of hands still in that last category. And the reason that I asked this question is because it really has to do with this concept of equality versus equity. We're not all starting from the same playing field. And to get to a point where we do have an equitable economy, we need to focus on what that means. So equality means essentially, in this picture, you see it on the left here, everyone receives the same supports regardless of whether or not they need them. So unfortunately, this little guy on the end still can't see the baseball game. He's on his one little box, and that's just not enough for him. But the guy on the left still has a box, although he doesn't need it. Equity is the second picture. It's where the guy that doesn't need the box doesn't have one, and the little guy gets 2 boxes and he can see the baseball game. That's what we're aiming for, right? We're attributing resources to people by their needs and helping them succeed in the economy. And to backtrack a little bit, I want to just give you an overview of what Canada's digital economy looks like. And Namir alluded to it a little bit when he talked about just employment and employment growth over the years. But essentially what we mean by the digital economy is the tech sector, and it's tech and everything else. And that's so important because today, tech is basically ubiquitous in many other sectors. We see tech in public administration, we see it in education, manufacturing, retail. It's really a core part of our entire economy. And that's why it employs roughly 2.6 million people by the end of 2023. And that's roughly 13% of the entire economy, and it has grown over the years. A couple of years ago, that was 11%. So you can see that increasingly, all sectors require people with digital skills, at least of some sort. What we're also seeing is just a continued sustained kind of upward trajectory. Of course, everything was impacted by the pandemic. In that first quarter or second quarter of 2020, everything had a bit of a dip. But the digital economy, if you can see that trend line, it's very small, but it's kind of on a continued upward trajectory. The general economy is more or less flat. And that's why we also see that employment growth, that 5-year trend line, is still significantly higher than across the overall economy. The only sector that has grown more in this period is the tech sector itself. Plainly put, just a lot of opportunity in the digital space, and we are going to see more and more people that do have to have that foundational digital knowledge and skill set to participate across all sectors. I just want to zoom in a little bit on demand because that was a very kind of high-level overview of all occupations in all sectors. But here we're in Toronto today, and I want to give you an example of what this labor market has looked like over the last couple of years. So we've been collecting data on over 100 jobs that we've identified as in demand across the economy, across 25 different cities. And that's been over 1 million jobs over the last couple of years. But basically since 2020 in Toronto alone, for only these 10 pure play technology jobs, we saw more than 120,000 job postings. And what I mean by pure play technology are just jobs that the essence of that role itself is technology based. So we have other jobs that do obviously require digital skills like digital marketing, business analyst, that's also in our 100 jobs, but these are kind of those foundational core tech jobs. So a lot of demand that we've seen over the last couple of years in Toronto alone. And to zoom in a little bit further, I'll just give you an example of this, the full stack developer. We've seen, we're classifying the kind of Q1 of 2020 as pre-pandemic, and since 2023 or May 2023, apparently the pandemic has stopped being a pandemic and is endemic now. We're classifying that as post-pandemic. But the reason this chart is here is really to show that although 2022 was kind of an anomalous year, we saw high growth across the digital economy. And as Namir alluded to, many of these companies, some of the large companies have had layoffs, just acknowledging that they had overhired during that period. What I wanted to show this, why I wanted to show this is because ultimately employment growth in Q1 of 2023 was still higher than the baseline, and we're using 2020 pre-pandemic as the baseline. The economy was still strong, there was lots of employment growth in the digital economy. Ultimately, the point of this is there's still significant growth and opportunity despite recent conditions and economic turmoil. So ultimately, what I'm getting at is demand is high, right? We've seen, this is, some of these articles are even from just a couple weeks ago, these headlines saying, why is there still a tech talent shortage in 2024? Despite layoffs, still high demand, still a shortage. So we're seeing shortages across the economy for tech roles. But ultimately, despite those shortages, we're still nowhere near where we need to be in terms of representation of women in the digital economy. Despite women making up nearly half of the entire workforce, they still only represent 30% of roles across the digital economy. So 2.6 million people employed, only 30% are women. And if we look at those pure play technology roles, women are even less represented, so more underrepresented in those roles specifically. If we're looking across the digital economy, they're just under 30%, 28%, and if we look in the ICT sector itself, so tech roles within the tech sector, that's just 1 in 5 women that represent those roles. And ultimately, the problem is that this is not a new thing. The representation of women across the digital economy has more or less stagnated for the last 10 years. Nothing has changed in that last 10 years. We've heard that employers are more aware, they're trying to attract more women, they've done things to be able to make their sector or their organization attractive to women, but it hasn't moved the dial, so to speak. And ultimately, there's many reasons for that, but part of it is that gender discrimination still exists across the digital economy and in the tech ecosystem. For this graph over here, this is from a study by DICE, the Equity in Tech Report, and it surveyed over 1,000 people across the US, but it essentially asked men and women, have you worked somewhere where you felt that your organization discriminated based on gender, or have you felt discriminated in your organization? Over here we have the women that said, 57% said yes, they have worked, so nearly 60% of women said that they have worked somewhere where they felt they were discriminated against based on their gender, and men, almost 3/4 of men said, no, I haven't, I've never experienced that, I don't know what you're talking about. So something's still amiss here. And for women of color, not only is this problem still there, but representation further plummets. There's additional barriers beyond gender, of course, to consider. These are not our studies, but research that we found. Unfortunately, this is only for the US, but research across the US has showed that when we look at representation of women of color in the digital economy or in the tech ecosystem, that representation is still extremely small. So about 1/4 of women are employed in the tech sector in the US, and of that, we have up to 15%. That's the highest representation that any study has found of these groups being represented. Yes, quick. Pardon? Nobody has done that research. So there is an opportunity there for sure. There's a need. But this is, so even at the highest level of representation in this National Center for Women in Information Technology report, that's 15% of the 1/4. So an extremely small population that is engaged in the tech sector. And there are many barriers, of course, and some of them we'll go over in the workshop later today, but ultimately what we found in studies, so this is a study by TechRadius, the Trust Women in Tech report in 2022, and it found that 2 of 5 US women of color working in the tech sector believe that their race is a significant barrier to promotion. So not only are there other barriers that they're encountering in terms of gaining access to the tech sector, but once they're there, they have identified or they themselves believe that they will not get promoted because of their race, or they will potentially have challenges being promoted. And part of the reason for that, there's many reasons, but part of it really is representation and that lack of advocates, of people that can help pave that path for you, as the minister talked about, right? Paving that pathway, ensuring that there's people there that look like you and can advocate for you to be promoted and advance in your career. And what this really highlighted is the work that's been done across the pandemic. There's been numerous research studies that talked about how different groups were impacted by the pandemic, how different groups have rebounded from the pandemic. And what this really highlighted is not only that the pandemic has changed how we work, some things good, some things potentially going back to the norm, so to speak, some things that may persist, some that won't, but ultimately it also highlighted inequities that exist across the economy. So while we have this challenge of representation in the tech sector and the digital economy, it's not unique to that. There's also been challenges across all sectors for people of color. And this is really highlighted by Census 2021. This is a great example of some of these inequities and some of these challenges that we continue to face as an economy. And what Census 2021 found is, compared to non-racialized counterparts with post-secondary degrees, Black people with post-secondary degrees not only faced more unemployment during the pandemic, but they also had a harder time rebounding, so getting back into the labor force, finding jobs that were suitable to their education. And in this case, the unemployment rates were nearly double that of their non-racialized counterparts. So while unemployment in 2022 and 2023 for non-racialized Canadians with post-secondary degrees was under 5%, and just as a reference, economists tend to view full employment as between 2 and 5%, so almost full employment for the non-racialized Canadians with post-secondary. For racialized Canadians, Black Canadians in particular, it was over 8%, and it kind of stayed that way despite the favorable economic conditions that we saw during 2022 and 2023. And the challenge is that while these issues persist, ultimately there's been numerous research. We've done research, other organizations have done research to show that actually having a diverse workforce is ultimately good for your business. It's good for the economy. It is correlated to greater innovation, greater profitability, and yet still the challenges persist. Yet we still don't have a fully representative workforce. It's not necessarily equitable, and it's not necessarily inclusive. And this is just one example of a study done by Josh Burson in the US, and it showed that organizations that have diverse workforces and equitable workforces are 70% more likely to capture new markets, which makes sense, right? To capture new markets, you want people that are diverse, that can speak to the needs of different populations and produce products and services that fill those needs. It also showed that those organizations have 15 times higher sales revenues, so again, directly related to profitability. The data is there. There's no kind of lack of evidence to show that an equitable and diverse workforce is good for business, but we still don't necessarily have that for different reasons. And one of the challenges really is at the start with the hiring process. And why I have this slide here is that ultimately, while we've heard studies that I think we've heard all anecdotally, women don't apply to jobs unless they have 100% of the skills in the job posting, but men apply if they have 50. Whether or not those numbers are subject to some flux is, there is question about that, but ultimately the challenge is how men versus women interpret the hiring process. We've all seen job postings where we throw everything in the kitchen sink at it. Here's my ideal person that has never existed and will never exist. But yet those job postings still exist and they're still quite prevalent. The challenge here is how women interpret that. So the graph that you see on the bottom here is really surveyed over 1,000 men and women in the US, and it was asking, why didn't you apply to that job where you were qualified for that job? And we see overwhelmingly that women do not apply if they think that, the guidelines were pretty clear about who they want to apply. I needed to have all those skills and I don't. Or they didn't think that they would necessarily get hired because they didn't meet all those qualifications. So again, we really need to focus on that entry pipeline. How inviting is it for people of diverse groups? Do we really need all those skills that we put in the job postings? And that's kind of some of the areas that employers can really work on to diversify their talent pool. And it really does start with signs, language, and branding, how you're putting yourself out there as an organization and what you're doing to attract diverse workforces. On the website, employers can, put out different, can showcase their diverse workforce. They can provide links to their EDI policies or what they're doing in this space. For job postings, they can really just focus on the skills that are truly needed for that job, including lived experience. They can provide EEO statements, so equal opportunity employment statements, and inclusive language. There has also been numerous studies that show gendered language also deters women from applying to certain roles, and that does tend to be, or did tend to be, fairly frequent in the technology space. Recruitment, it's not really just a build it and they will come scenario. So you can put out a really inclusive job posting. That still doesn't mean you're necessarily going to attract people from diverse backgrounds or through networks that you don't already have. So forming those relationships with organizations that specifically work to provide services to underrepresented groups is another key area to focus on for employers. And of course, in evaluation, we need to make sure that the interview process and assessment process for candidates that apply are standardized. It's, to the extent possible, it's unbiased, and interviewers or people that are on the panel for the interviews also understand how to properly do this. Another thing to consider is that not everyone necessarily interviews well, so there's other ways to assess people as well, including samples of work or portfolios that they may have relevant to the role. Company culture is kind of another thing that definitely comes up a lot in our research as important to attract new entrants into the space, to attract women and diverse groups. And what we found in our research is that although men and women both value a positive or supportive company culture equally, they experience it differently. So in a survey that we did our EDI and tech survey in 2021, collected over 1,000 responses of people working in tech across the economy. When we asked, does your organization have a supportive company culture, 12% of men said yes, so still not very high, but only 8% of women said that as well. And the challenge is that company culture is key to boosting representation. This is a study from Trust Radius in the US again, and it did ask people if they had worked at a company where they felt bro culture, which is kind of endemic to tech, was pervasive. Again, you see here nearly 70% of women said yes, less than 40% of men said yes. So changing culture and ensuring that that's clear across the different levels of leadership is really important. One thing that organizations can do is really focus on engagement. So do you collect feedback from your employees? Could be an anonymous survey, could be another type of way to collect this feedback, but is that ever asked, or is it just top-down decision-making? And more important than collecting that feedback, the only thing worse than not collecting it is collecting it and not doing anything with it. So ensuring that you're actually actioning those results that come from that survey means that people feel heard and people feel represented in their organization. EDI policy development, of course, not everyone has the resources to do this to the extent of Microsoft or a large company, but even just putting signals out there that this is important, this is something we're working on, we're working with partners in the space to develop that is important. Culture, employees can all benefit from unconscious bias training. That's at the leadership level and at the general employee level, and really looking to into your promotion process. So in that slide that I showed earlier where black women in the US felt that their race was a deterrent to promotion, what does that promotion process look like? Is that the case, or are there ways to kind of make it more equitable and inclusive across the organization? And leadership needs to, well, lead by example. So they should be accountable for their own actions and for the entire employee base. Mentorship programs are important, both internal and external, and career advancement pathways need to be clear. There's a recent survey by Gallup, I believe, that showed one of the key reasons that people left their recent places of employment was because there was just not a clear pathway for career advancement. That was not communicated to them. It didn't feel like something that was necessarily attainable. So this is something people want, and clarity around that is important. And the last thing that I'll talk about, and it's really from our research on that we've done on gender equity in tech, which you can read if you have some time, but really is that additional support in terms of accommodations and understanding that people are coming to work more than just kind of at a 9-to-5 base, right? Like they're bringing more of themselves to work. And with remote work and hybrid work, ultimately that line between where work starts and ends and where your personal life starts and ends does tend to blur. And what we found really, or what Census 2021 found was that ultimately in 2022, sorry, this was not Census 2021, it was a different StatsCan survey, but more than half of Canadian women provided care to children or to adults a lot of the time while they were working. So this is additional unpaid labor that women were doing. Women were much more likely than men to engage in this type of activity, and they also reported higher instances of negative feelings or stress or anxiety related to that. So we have to acknowledge that in the kind of world that we're living in now, where people are working from home, they also have additional responsibilities, and women a lot of the time have caregiving responsibilities that they're doing at the same time. So understanding that and providing that flexibility is really important for organizations. Could be job flexibility in terms of flexible hours or hybrid or remote work. And it could just really be focusing on health and well-being as well, acknowledging that people have different things that are happening in their lives, could be putting together family care policies, really analyzing whether you have the right resourcing so you don't burn out employees, and just openly talking about mental health. A recent survey that I saw from Leger polled Canadians across the country, and it showed something like 25% of youth are struggling with mental health to some degree. So acknowledging that this is real and this is something that is impacting your employees is really important. And this is all from our gender equity in Canada's tech ecosystem report, which you can access through this QR code or by going on our website. But ultimately, it's just a really good resource that we've put together from engagements with over 300 people, subject matter experts, employers across the economy, to really understand what we actually need to do to move that dial. So how do we get from this 30% employment in the digital economy that we've had for over 10 years, and how do we move that closer to gender parity? Thank you. I'll hand it over to my colleague Marina now that's going to talk a little bit about the Ambassador Program and its impact.
Hello everyone, good morning. So nice to see you all. Usually I like to start my presentation with a joke, but you know, I woke up at 4 a.m. this morning in Ottawa, so there's no jokes today. And I'm not a morning person. My kids really tried hard to train me to be a morning person. I have a 5-year-old and 1-year-old, and it's a work in progress. But you know what helps? Coffee a little bit, yes, but seeing you here in person and feeling that positive energy that you're sharing. So thank you very much for that. Thank you very much, Lexi. And thank you for the introduction. Okay, so today I'd like to talk about the Ambassador Program that we've been running here for 3 years. Let me move it up a little bit. And the program was funded by Women and Gender Equity. Yeah, a little bit up. Yeah. Thank you so much. So the program being funded by Women in Gender and Equity. And we've been working with WAGE for short since 2020. And we worked on a number of initiatives that were supporting women and marginalized gender to enter and advance in the digital economy. As Alexandra mentioned, the real challenge is that women make up less than 30% in the digital economy. Namir mentioned it, so we all hear about it. So objective of this program is to foster equitable pathway for women in the Canadian digital economy and to work towards gender parity and intersectional inclusion. I'm either really tall or Simpson is wrong with microphone. So to tackle this challenge, ICTC performing the following interventions. Address the underrepresented of women in tech through education and awareness building, through evidence-based research and the help of the ambassadors. As well to develop and deploy targeted support for businesses, including resources for employers and tools that could be used to engage women and build gender-inclusive workplaces. So this is a 3-year program, and it has 2 stages. The program comes to the end of March, so we're at the final stage right now. In the first year, we conducted research, mostly primary research, including focus groups, interviewing experts, doing a survey, having advisory committee members who validate the results of the research. So we engaged more than 320 experts into this research. In the first phase of the program, ICT delivered a first-of-its-kind report on gender equity in the digital economy. At the end of the report, you can find an employer guide or a toolkit outlining best practices to improving gender equity. In the second phase of the research, year 2 and 3, we worked with ambassadors or the experts in the field. As well, we held knowledge mobilization activity, and we developed gender equity assessment tool. So let's focus on the ambassadors and the activities that we did during this year 2 and 3. ICTC recruited and trained 74 ambassadors for this project, all over Canada. They played a crucial role in this report. They promoted gender equity. They have been actively involved with the organization and businesses that participated in this research and were guiding them to foster positive change. They communicated the advantage of hiring, supporting, promoting women in the digital economy. Then, in the year 2, the program hub was developed. This is kind of a community collaboration space where ambassador could basically engage with the participants. The hub allowed to connect and exchange the ideas. As well, the participant could post their ideas, publish events that they're interested in, publish a blog, an article, or just engage in the discussion. It served as a centralized platform that compiles all program resources, including blogs, reports, articles, and all the materials that have been circulated during this project. So all the materials were available for free, accessible anytime, and the participant could access it in their own pace. Next, ICTC held 4 regional in-person workshops in 4 cities: Calgary, Montreal, Halifax, and Toronto, with a focus to attract and retain and support women in the technology sector, with practical actions that every employer can take to improve equity, diversity, and inclusion with the organization. More than 80 business participants, business leaders were engaged in these in-person workshops. After every workshop and webinar, we did a survey to understand and to gather the feedback from the events. So these particular events, the overall satisfaction was 4.7 out of 5, indicating the high level of satisfaction and the positive feedback that we received from these events. Next is webinars. We held 7 webinars in English and French, covering different EDI topics that you can see on the slide: unconscious bias, gender microaggression in tech workplaces, create an equitable brand, supporting a diverse workforce, mastering an equitable recruitment process, empowering 2S LGBTQ+ people in tech, and the last, the event that will be held on in the end of February 27th, championing diversity in honor of Black History Month. So in total, 613 participants registered for the program, which the number is quite larger than we expected, boosting the program visibility. Out of that 613, 253 businesses were, we call them active. They were active. They participated in 4 in-person regional events and 4 workshops. And now I have a question to the audience. How many organizations here, or representative organizations, have already taken measures to increase gender diversity in the organization? Okay, I see some hands, but I'm surprised that not everyone really. So it's important for companies to apply the measures, but what's important, most important, is to measure the success. And that's why ICTC developed the Gender Equity Assessment Tool. It's an online tool that's designed to evaluate and assess organizations' EDI policy and procedures. The tool provides information to support the development of inclusive policies for recruiting, retaining, and advancing women in tech. And based on the results of the assessment, the tool provides a customized plan and actionable items to improve organizations' EDI policies and procedures. We recommend to use this tool twice, before you make any changes and after, to see the result. So as I mentioned, ICTC collects, analyzes, and aggregates the results of all the activities we do. So we got results from the gender equity tool to understand the current state in the digital economy, of gender equity in the digital economy. And here's the sneak peek of the results, because as I mentioned, the project being finalized right now, and I'm literally right now writing this report. So as shown in this figure, the black, looks black, but it's actually dark blue, represent the percentage of companies that were positive about the statement. The red area in the middle represent the percentage of companies that decided to be neutral about the statement, and the pink area represent the companies that were negative about the statement provided. So overall, the respondents expressed predominantly positive feedback. You can see the number is around 80%. When it comes towards the question regarding organization efforts to create that comfortable environment for all the employees. On the next slide, we can see that these are 10 least favorable question sentiments, and only 20% of companies, or around that, were positive towards the statement concerning the implementation on employee resource group, gender equity training and leadership development programs, conducting consistent training for all employees on gender equity, and implementing blind hiring process in recruitment. So this is the highlights of the areas that could be improved. And now I'd like to talk about the impact of this project and the outcomes. So as mentioned earlier, the goal of this project is to promote gender equity in Canada's digital economy. And although this goal is not a short-term, but as one participant mentioned, one step at a time, and we'll get there. And here's a concise overview of the program's outcomes derived from interviews that we did in the final stage of this project. First of all, program achieved awareness, which is crucial for fostering understanding and driving meaningful change. Second, the program provided education and training on different EDI topics that I mentioned earlier, which develop a deeper understanding of diversity-related issues, if they exist in the companies, and ways to address them. The program supported businesses with resources and tools that were accessible, understandable, and easy to implement. It helped to improve policies, EDI policies, and procedures. One of the participants mentioned that she could immediately use the information provided and implement it in the upcoming activities, strategy, and planning for the next year. And as well, the program helped to emphasize on the importance of building equitable employer brand, which is essential for attracting the top talent to organizations. As I mentioned, this is not the full list, as we finalize the report right now. So this program truly laid the groundwork for moving the dial and grow in the representation of women in the digital economy. And here you can see some testimonials from the participants. My favorite one is, there were a lot of great conversations today. As a male C-suite co-founder, I need directions on how to implement a program to ensure we're acquiring top female talent, and I'm willing to drive this change. And if there is one statement that I would like to leave with all of you today, it is, no matter who or where you are, if people feel a sense of belonging and are valued by their employers for their unique contributions, they are empowered to make their organization stronger through innovation, through being innovative and creative. Thank you very much for your attention today. And now I open the floor to the audience questions. Equality, diversity, and inclusion.
Using the mic.
Okay. So you mentioned, in regards to gender equality, you mentioned that you guys did a study. There's a study right now basically showing what the environment is like right now. Are there any mandates? Are there any resources that are available to companies to ensure that they are following through with their equality promises or anything like that? Or is it just kind of like we just watch and see and observe what's going on in the environment?
You want to take that?
So, you are taller. Well, there's not mandates, right? So we can't necessarily mandate that employers follow through on it. We do have the resource hub that allows them to track their progress. They can continue to take the tool, they can share resources, they can use the resources that are on the hub, and some of those include free training, for example, on unconscious bias. So there's things in place to help them move that dial, and while we can't guarantee that they necessarily will, what the benefit of the program, is kind of one of the quotes really showed, is kind of bringing awareness, so helping people understand how to actually do that. The one quote from that male co-founder I did find quite impactful myself, in that it's not clear to him. It's a small company, you know, this is his first company that he started. It was not necessarily clear to him on even how to write a gender-neutral job description, or how to frame that in a way that would attract diverse talent. So we are hopeful, and we will continue to kind of monitor the results, but ultimately, you know, unfortunately, we can't mandate that change happens.
Thank you for your presentation. Maybe just to build off of that question, what are future directions for research to further move the needle?
So we will continue to do research on this topic within the broader kind of umbrella of our digital economy research, where we always look at demand and supply. And within supply, we look at different supply groups. Could be women. We have some research we're doing right now on the representation of Black and Indigenous communities across the ecosystem, and that'll be released hopefully end of this month, and a number of different areas. We're also kind of a tag along to this project. It's sort of a phase 2. It's called the Feminist Response Project, I think, but essentially we're focusing on that next piece. So this one focuses on entry. How do we get more people, more diverse groups in the digital economy? And that next project focuses on, okay, how do we fill that second problem of once they're there to get more people into leadership positions? Another thing that has a statistic that has not really changed over the last couple of years. And in that one, we've kind of done the research that's been published as well, and we're also working directly with employers to implement actions that they've identified as achievable for their company. So if they're a big company, they can probably do something bigger. If they're small, maybe they start small with non-gendered job descriptions, for example, and track that progress. So hopefully that answered your question in a bit of a roundabout way, but different areas that we kind of continue to work on using that research to actually have an impact in the ecosystem.
It's not so much a question, but a statement. I know that you do a lot of these studies, and it's gender studies, male, female, but the issue isn't that it needs to be broken down a lot more than that, because I am black first, woman second. So I'm called a black woman. And so when you do these, even if you say the 30%, how much of that percent is black? I wouldn't be surprised if only 1% is us. So, and a lot of the racism we face isn't just from males, it's sometimes from other women from people of color and even white women. And those can also hold us back. So it's not just a gender issue, because that sometimes is an issue unto itself. So I think it needs to be broken down even further. And it's nice when you show these folks saying, oh, I'm gonna do this. But the problem is, like you said, unless there are mandates in there to make sure that these things are being enforced, nothing will change. The talk is cute. I mean, we had the Black North Initiative that happened in 2020. And they did research on that, and there was 205 companies, major companies like Bell, Rogers, so many, Amazon and all that took part, and only a fraction of them even did any of this stuff. Who is holding these people accountable? We're not being allowed to hold anybody accountable when they don't do the work. It's nice when people say things, but that's not enough for me. I want to see actual action. Thank you.
I don't disagree. I mean, that's a very salient point. One thing I will say is some companies have built-in internal policies to address this. I'll give just one example. So a lot of companies in the creative technology space, like animation, visual effects, they typically, the way the Canadian market works is it's kind of work for hire, so they work for US parent companies. And a lot of those US parent companies, because we work with them, actually do require the companies to consistently track EDI data. So how many more people, like Indigenous people, have they hired? How many black women have they hired? That's something that is required to actually get the contract. It's a small piece. I'm not saying it's gonna be solving anything, but it is a step in the right direction that I'm at least hopeful about. And hopefully we move that 30% marker a little bit further.
In and have the numbers for certain roles, but when you look, the higher you go, the less there is. So I think there needs to be more, I just feel a lot more accountability for that. It's not enough to have some numbers or to have one token here or one there and be like, oh, we did our job. To me, that's not enough. And it's the same with the company I work in. I spoke to the CEO because I speak up, and especially for my community. I love my community, my people. And to tell me, and the things that I find is that when they have one person in there, they feel like that's enough. And so that's not enough. Having one person that's a manager or having one there, it's not enough to me. A lot more needs to be done than that. And so I know for you that may feel good that you've moved this a little bit, but this little bit, it can be moved a lot more. And I think a lot more needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all your remarks, and we are moving forward in the program. We're going to take one or two more questions. I think you have one question, just one last question, and the other lady maybe, please.
So I'm a small business owner and have been working with ICTC for the last 4 years to bring on a number of students, interns, and it's been great. It's really helped us increase our diversity and inclusion. What I'm struggling with, and I have like a page of notes here around the policy and like all of the things that I should be doing. If I could only focus on 2 things in the next 6 months, what would the 2 things that I should be focusing on? Small, like to make a step forward. I
would love to say that you should do 1 and 2, But we'd probably need a little bit more context on the circumstance of your company, right? So understanding what exactly are you trying to achieve? How much resources do you have to put towards that? There's a lot of free content out there, which is great, and we can share that with you. But ultimately, you know, if you're trying to achieve something larger, that comes with more time, that comes with funding associated to it. So we're happy to work with you to kind of see what that pathway looks like. But yeah, TBD, I guess, depending on your circumstances and specific needs. Yes, yeah, and Marina's the right person to reach out for that. She's leading that project.
And one last question, please.
Thank you so much for your information. It was a lot of eye-opening, even though we know it. It was seeing it black and white. It was awakening for me. How does one get involved in being a program, an ambassador for the program? Because I'm a Global Peace Ambassador, and I wanna give back more. And even though I don't look black, you know, I am black, and people look at me and go, "Which part of you is black?" But it is in me. Just you gotta look deeper. So how does someone get involved?
It's okay.
But great question. So Melissa's around here somewhere. She's
Thank you so much, Alexandra and Marina. What a tough subject, right? EDI has always been very tough, and you guys handled it very well. And if you allow me, ladies and gentlemen, I would like us to acknowledge and to recognize the work that ICTC has been doing so far by gathering us together, by going to the community to find answers. So I would like us to take 1 minute just to give a round of applause to ICTC for everything that they have been doing so far. There is a real determination from ICTC to build something, and we want to engage them, and we want to collaborate with them. Alors, mesdames et messieurs, nous allons à présent prendre une petite pause de 5 minutes, 2, 3 peut-être, avant de passer à la prochaine articulation de la matinée. So, we are going to take a short break. You know, if somebody want to take coffee, tea, water, and then we are moving forward for the panel. Thank you so much. I think I'm shorter. It's okay here. Perfect. Okay, let me. Yeah, just, yeah, perfect, perfect. A little bit down, please. A little bit. Thank you. I think I'm shorter than everyone before me. Thank you so much for the lovely break, and we hope you guys enjoy tea, coffee, water, juice, anything, refreshment. We will now please ask you to come back in the room as we are going to start our panel discussion. We are so happy to have those vibrant, those amazing, and I love to call them Queen Black legend. They are all there. They are supporting the digital economy. They are working very hard to shape Canada's digital economy. And sometimes, nobody noticed. So that's why ICTC decided to gather all of them here to make sure that all their hard work has been noticed. So today, they are going to entertain us on the topic, Black Women Leadership in Canada's Digital Economy. And I have the honor to announce them, one each. So ladies, you will just come on the stage one on the row after your name being announced. So who are there? And so first of all, I'm going to start by Madame Madeleine Myrtil. Madeleine Myrtil, who is the Vice President of Entrepreneuriat, Groupe 3737. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Madame Madeleine. Bienvenue, Madame Madeleine. Merci de nous rejoindre. Je vais juste activer votre micro.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Very pleased to be here this morning.
Welcome, Madame Madeleine. Merci beaucoup de nous honorer de votre présence. Moving forward, I will invite Fabière Bonaparte. She is a diversity advocate. A round of applause for Fabière Bonaparte as well, please. Welcome, Miss Fabière. Bienvenue à vous.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me? Perfect. Welcome. And I'm so looking forward to this discussion with you guys.
I know we are all looking forward to hearing you today. And then I'm moving forward with Mrs. Miranda Mackay. She is the CEO and founder of Mackay Consulting, Inc. Welcome, and let's give a hand for Miss Miranda. Welcome, Miranda. What a beautiful panel. So happy having you here. Bienvenue.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And last but not the least, we have the wonderful Christine Diconger. She is the founder and CEO of Aqua Consulting Agency, and she is also the board director of the French television en Ontario, Groupe Média TFO. Bienvenue, Madame Christine. Veuillez nous rejoindre, s'il vous plaît. Bienvenue à vous, Christine Diconger.
Merci. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Are you guys excited for today?
We are, definitely. Merci beaucoup, mesdames. Thank you so much, ladies, for being here today, and thank you for sharing all the insight. And to move forward, we have a special person coming here today to discuss with our invite. It will be Ms. Shade Murray. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a hand for Ms. Shade. She will be discussing with all our panelists of the day, and we are looking forward for the discussion. Enjoy your time.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for
taking the time out of your busy schedules, your busy days to join us for a very important discussion, a very important opportunity, look at history and the impacts of Black women across Canada, across our nation. So this is our second Black History Month conference, and we are actually going to be building on last year's conference. So last year we actually discussed post-pandemic recovery, Black women leadership, what that looks like. This year we're going to be building on that. So during this discussion, we're going to deep dive into what it takes to actually be a leader as a woman of color. You guys have all done it, and so we want to hear from your experience. We want to hear what you guys do, kind of what that looks like, step into your world a little bit. As we heard from the Honorable Marcy Ian, you guys are the representation that we need to see in the community, right? So we're gonna love to hear from you, deep dive into a discussion. It's gonna be great. We are also going to talk about strategies for success and how collaboration and community building are critical for young women entrepreneurs, especially in the Black community. So we have 4 women, amazing women from diverse backgrounds, and they're going to bring forward a wealth of knowledge and experience. Individually, each person seated here with me today has impacted the lives of Canadians through their work. Through their work in the leadership space, their dedication to creating new opportunities for women of color. So just want to kind of set the stage for what we're actually going to be discussing, what that's going to look like. As we begin this dialogue, I do ask that we keep all questions until the end of the panel discussion, and at that time, you will have the opportunity to share your thoughts, ask questions, and kind of go back and forth with our panelists. So the one thing that I want to start with, and we kind of heard it in previous presentations, but can we begin by defining the terms that we see used today? EDI, or equity, diversity, and inclusion. So for each of you, what is EDI, and how can other leaders incorporate its practices? If you'd like to go first.
Let me start the ball. Oh, can you hear me well? Yes? Okay. Good. By the way, I'm more French than English, so if you see that I'm stumbling in certain words, it's because of my French that is trying to kick in. So be please gentle with me. So EDI for me, essentially, it means that you're included in the dance, meaning that it's one thing to be invited, but it's another thing to feel comfortable in the place. And that's what it means for me, inclusion. Because sometimes what we see in organization is that people have checklists. So I have to make sure that I have 5 women. I have to make sure that I have 2 diversity. I have to make sure that I have somebody from the LGBTQ+. So it's a checklist, but it cannot be that. It has to be intentional, and you have to make sure that not only that the person is in the organization, but that the person feels good in the organization and that the person can emancipate themselves in the organization. So it's not a checklist, it's really to be intentional and to make sure that everybody has a place, a voice, and a say in the conversation.
Definitely. Definitely. Any of you ladies want to build on that? What does EDI mean to you?
For me, I totally agree with what you said. But at the core, it means just being a good human being, you know, starting off with good morals, respecting others, feeling that community. EDI means that we all can come together and work for a cause and be at that table and have that voice.
Yep, I definitely agree with all of those. For me, I, again, agree with what that says, and I think of DEI or EDI, if we looked at it from just the individual words, of diversity really being, you know, what makes us unique. I think in today's modern world, we often just look at diversity from just gender identity or race and ethnicity, as opposed to looking at it more broadly of our diversity of thought, our socioeconomic status, our educational attainment, our country of origins, et cetera. And I think of most organizations when we're as you're saying, doing a lot of these diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, we're just ticking the box. Do we have X amount of people of color at our organization, as opposed to looking at it much more broadly of who are we bringing into our organization that can actually start to foster more innovation and drive some of our business objectives. And then on those other areas of once you bring the team in that is diverse, from an equity perspective, giving them equal access to those opportunities, and then from an inclusion perspective, making sure that everyone feels they can do things such as challenge the status quo, that their voices are heard, and that they can truly contribute to organizations.
And I completely agree with what everyone said today. But for me, I think that EDI, diversity and inclusion, is something that should have been taught in high school. It's something that we just play catch up. Like all the bullies that got away in high school, they were, not including another teammate, colleague in playing with them. Those are the people that are now leading teams today. So today we're playing catch up with those, bullies from high school, and now we have to deal with it in a workplace setting. And that's how EDI is coming to play. So that's why a lot of people feel like they're being policed by the EDI because they know that they've never been a good person since they started in school. So I think this is something that until we address that, we're never going to really address the elephant in the room because you are, again, a lot of people that got away with different things that they were doing in high schools. So if now we want to talk about it more in a workplace setting, it's, a set of guideline policies that are there to ensure that everybody feel included. But we are never going to feel included except until everybody accepts us, right? So it's a more, although we want to bring it as it's an organizational landscape, it's really more like an individual, it's an individual thing that we need to kind of destroy, and I think it's very hard to educate people at such a late stage in their life if they're not willing to accept the other and embrace diversity. Yeah. So that's what it means for me.
I agree completely. So we've defined what it means, and I think a couple of you have actually touched on some of the challenges. So maybe you want to elaborate that. Let's dive deeper into that. So we can define it. We know exactly what EDI is. Even though it might sound a little bit different, people might resonate with it differently. At the end of the day, the core is all still the same, right? So let's dive deeper into that. What are some of the biggest challenges in your industry as it relates to EDI? Madeleine, did you want to take us away again?
Yes. Again, if we talk about the tech industry, usually when you go to an event in the tech industry, first, you won't see diversity in terms of minorities, and you won't see a lot of women as well, unfortunately. Again, it's not because they don't have businesses. We have a lot of women who have businesses in the tech industry. We have one today, Farnell, WorkKind, that is right there, that is doing extraordinary things. We have another one, Claudette McDowen with Protexa. So there's women involved in the tech industry. Unfortunately, it's still a boys' club. They're not necessarily invited in the conversation. They're not necessarily invited in the panels. So it's still that little group that has access to the information, and it's really, really hard in order to get into the room. However, what I like to say is that once you enter in the room, you have the responsibility as a woman, as a person from a diverse background, to include somebody else as well. We have that responsibility because, yes, the society has a role, but ourselves, individual, we have a role as well in order to make a change. So when I participate in an event, I'm going to invite one of my girls, one of the buddies, and say, listen, are you aware that that event is being held? You need to participate. We need to be more out there. So yes, the industry has a role, but ourselves as well, we have that role to know what's out there and to put ourselves out there. Because unfortunately, and we're going to talk about it a little bit after, but we have that imposter syndrome. We have a lot of things, a lot of baggage that we carry with ourselves. We need to take out this load and just do like Nike said, just do it. Yeah. Just do it. Just put yourself out there. Go get that thing, and you will strive. Yes, it doesn't mean that you will succeed the first time, but at least you tried. And after trying and trying and trying, well, people are going to be, my God, it's been 5 times since I saw her. She might have something to say, or she might have something interesting to bring in the table, and that's going to make a difference. We need to force the difference as well in the chain. We cannot just stay there and wait until it does change. We have to be part of the solution, and we have to make concrete actions. And the concrete action, first, it's to get yourself out there. It's to work on your pitch, work on your project to make sure that when you present yourself, it's a solid project, and that's how it's going to change. But we have to get out there. Yes, the industry has a responsibility, but as well, ourselves, we have that responsibility as well.
Right. So one of the definitely. So one of those challenges would be the confidence in self as women, as Black women in the industry, actually getting out there and taking on these challenges, even if you don't see representation, and we're bringing it forward, right? We have these women here. Even if you don't see that representation, then as you said, just do it. You be that voice and step up.
And if I might just add, you see, I'm wearing colors. Usually when I go to the events, I make sure that I wear colors, so I will be seen. I will be seen. You will remember me. You don't have a choice but to remember me. My name might be difficult to remember, but for sure you're going to remember me.
Of course. Yeah. Ladies, other challenges in your industry?
Yes, I agree with you that accountability on self is very important, and I guess another lens too would be the accountability of your colleagues, you know, that allyship aspect of not showing, the word I want to use is performative allyship, right? So doing that deep work on yourselves to really understand the plight of Black females, of other individuals and equity-seeking groups is also key. And I find that that's a challenge. Marcy kind of touched on it, you know, the fear of the unknown, the fear of tackling major issues as anti-Black racism. A lot of people are fearful of stepping into that space, right, and acknowledging it. So it's a difficult task because it's a conversation that everybody has to have with themselves when they're ready, and that's a problem.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Allyship. Yeah,
the allyship
and support.
Wanting things to change.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And now seeing all the color here, I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have worn black. Oh, man. Okay, so learning things too. If I were to take it from thinking of some of the organizations we work with and some of the challenges that we see, I find, you know, we touched on some of the individual barriers around accountability, around imposter syndrome, et cetera. And then there's those institutional barriers that I think a lot of organizations struggle with, and those are the processes, the policies, et cetera. So to give an example, I don't think many people go into the day, into their office, and they're like, today I'm going to be a racist. Or I'm going to implement a racist policy. I like to be optimistic and hope that that's not what we're seeing in our organizations. But instead what happens at a lot of organizations is we have these legacy processes, these legacy policies that are creating these systemic barriers. So when we think of our sourcing strategies for talent, when we think of our promotion strategies. So to give an example, we were working with an organization, and they were noticing that women, particularly newcomer women in mid-management positions, were not being promoted to leadership. This is no surprises to this audience. We hear this story all the time. When we dove into why this was happening, it was because one of the major reasons for that promotion was sales. So you had to generate and originate business. I don't know about you guys, but if you're a newcomer to this country and you may just not have a CEO on speed dial, that metric becomes much more difficult. So that's an example of an institutional process and policy that potentially needs to change. And we need to think about how are we, we have this potential candidate that would be great if we were able to support them and give them access to the network, the business development, sales development options that they need. And that's where I find some of those challenges exist. And again, when we think about our institutions, I don't know how many of you have tried to change a policy at your organization. We have government here. Very difficult, takes a long time, and then there's the change management associated to it. So it's those barriers that are really challenging, and I think we need to kind of address those at an institutional level at organizations if we truly want to make change on some of those systemic barriers.
Finally, for me, I think I'm just going to add to what all the women said here today, but just taking it a little bit into my personal career. So when I started, so I finished, so a little bit about my background, right? So I've lived in 7 different countries: Cameroon, Madagascar, Mozambique, Kenya, South Africa, maybe I'm forgetting some in between, and Canada, and I've been in Canada since 14 years. So when I moved to Canada, I moved as an international student. Today I'm Canadian, but as I moved as an international student, just keep in mind that I was raised in the diplomatic scene. So for me, it's really when I moved in France, when I was like, okay, I'm black, okay, that's what it is, okay, I'm black. But from there, I moved to Kenya, and there I've met white people, Indian people, all sort of people all coming together. So I never had this. I knew racism exists, but I never really had that, sense of what exactly it is in a space, because in all the space that I was going, because I was with my parent, I was always kind of protected. So I never really felt that until I started working in corporate Canada. In my first job, I was working at an investment company, the #1 investment company in Canada, and I started in operation. So in operation, you see, like many other organizations, in operation, you will see, the immigrants, the diversity. So the subject of diversity and inclusion, it's there, but you see every people that look like you. So you don't really, see really what it means. And until I got promoted into the strategy side of the business, and there I was the only black girl of the entire building, there was no other person than me. The other black guy was a vice president of sales. So that's when, and I remember I was 23, so that's when I started asking those questions to myself, why am I the only black girl? And I was just 23, I didn't know all the things that I knew today, and I always tried to put my best forward, I was always best in department, and every month they would change the rules, and I've always beat, they change the rule, I'm #1, they change the rule, I'm #1, so I'm just what's going on? Where's my promotion? So even when you get in an organization where all the policies are there and you meet all the criteria, there's still this unconscious bias that means why am I going to bring this Cameroonian African girl to come in here, bust people around, things like that, right? So I'm just really putting it the way I have to put it, because that's how I felt. So for me, I've always been in a space where it's always the white boys club, in investment, everybody doing this, that. And I was like, I'm going to go to Queen's because everybody went to Queen, and I went to Queen to get my master in management and entrepreneurship, and to get out of there and then work in the startups environment where it's always the same thing, until I start understanding that, just a little bit what Mudlan said earlier, once you get in the room and you don't see people who look like you, it's your responsibility to open down the doors. So before the pandemic, I started seeing all of these things, and if you find me online on Google, you will see that most of the time when there was Elevate, before they start bringing, Elevate Black, myself and the City of Toronto, they had the black group at the City of Toronto. We worked together to raise funds to bring black youth students to go to Elevate, to go to Collision before it became before the government stepped in and put in money in there. So I was really in the very early stage, always the conversation to ensure that, while I have this opportunity, because maybe I met someone, I started realizing that networking is really what's going to save you, because at the end of the day, you still have to make things happen for yourself, and the only way for you to make things happen for yourself is to network and to know people that are going to help you move around needle in your career so that you can, they can meet some of your objectives, or they can help you in terms of mentorship. We mentioned earlier allyship. But then the allyship, even when you're in an organization, you will find someone and say, hey, would you like to be my sponsor? It's not everybody that really understand the role of being a sponsor of a minority, like someone, a minority. So it's a very hard conversation, and for me, I like to think that, we're in a position where we can break barriers ourselves, and once we break this barrier, to keep the momentum, it's important to leave the door open, because a lot of, we go to a lot of places and people will have this conversation, but are they really leaving the door open behind them? Are we really doing that? Yeah. So for me, I like to say that, as much as I'm a leader, it's very important to be able to measure my leadership in terms of the doors that I've opened for other people behind me, the same way as people has opened doors for me as well.
Definitely, definitely. So coming together, coming together as a community, allyship, mentorship, support, allyship from individuals who might not look like yourself, because those are the people that could open those doors, right? So stepping outside of your own communities. So we've identified some of the challenges, right? Let's take a little bit of a turn and let's talk about some of the improvements. So obviously, as you know, ICTC, we do focus on the Canadian digital economy. What role does technology play in the improvement or even introduction of EDI into an organization? Do you want to take it away? Go ahead.
It's very dangerous to give me a mic, okay? It's very dangerous because I'm very passionate about that subject, so I could go on and on and on. But
please.
So let me be more direct. So regarding EDI and all the tools it's tools actually right now that are available that weren't there before. We're able, and one of the reports that we noticed is we're able to have numbers. So when you can measure something, you can improve it. But when you don't know, you think that we have a company that is diverse. We think that we have more women than men. We think that we have different range of ages in the company. But when you do a study, when you use a tool that has nothing to do with a human, that it's only numbers, purely objective. Ooh.
Realities.
Okay? Yes, reality check. And I think that technology has brought like a new mirror. Now people are able to see themselves, companies are able to see themselves through numbers. Now, first, you need to acknowledge those numbers, and then you take actions. And I'm very pleased about what CTIC, right?
ICTC.
Perfect. Did in order to help those companies, because sometimes they just don't know. They want to, but they just don't know. For them, it's like a huge elephant in the room, and they're like, oh my God, everybody's talking about EDI. What are we doing with that? And now the financial world is saying that, okay, if you don't have an EDI measure in your organization, you won't get that funding, because now it's that. So they're like, uh-oh, we're touching the bottom line, so we need to react to that, because number works, So they're like, okay, now what do I do? But how do you eat an elephant? Bit by bit. So we just need to offer them tools, and with technology now, it's possible. With training, again, you can measure and see, and you don't have to do everything, because again, usually companies are like, oh my God, we need to do this, 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 and that. Rome wasn't built in one day.
Right.
Focus, have one objective, and then make sure that you have KPIs in order to see that you're going to attain those objectives, and then you continue with it. But technology now gives tools. I think that to respond to your questions, it's tools. Tools that weren't there before, that raise awareness. And with awareness comes responsibilities, comes imputability. So that's what works now.
Definitely, definitely.
I can second that, having that disaggregated data, especially for equity-seeking groups, Black employees. Oftentimes we get lumped into visible minority, but there is a specific need and gap for employees and that are Black. So I totally agree with everything she has said. With technology as well, it does offer an opportunity to see those gaps and build on it. And who knows what could be developed once everybody realizes what the gaps are. I feel that technology can also provide other solutions. I'm not too sure, I don't invent anything, but I'm not a software engineer, but other opportunities are available out there as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, so definitely agree with everything. And yeah, I'm a data nerd myself. My background's actually in data architecture and engineering. And I ended up getting into the HR space primarily because I was shocked about how many organizations didn't use data to understand their demographics, and they're building all of these solutions with not understanding the root cause. Imagine if you were in any other business domain and you went to your CEO and said, hey, let's acquire the company. And you're like, why? And they're like, I don't know, gut feel. That's what a lot of our decisions are today around people, which is shocking. So data is definitely a huge piece. And I think now with the collection of data, especially in Canada, we're getting a bit better. I don't think we're there yet at all. Honestly, at all, but it's getting better. But then looking at how do you leverage that data to truly understand and dive into some use cases and hypotheses, like are there issues with promotion rates? Are there issues with employee attrition? We build predictive models and we're talking about AI and all of these amazing things for everything else but understanding our people. And organizations will always come out and say, people are our biggest asset. We care most about people, yet we know the least about them, which again is the most shocking thing when we think about it from that perspective. So I would encourage everyone at your organizations to look at how are we capturing this data. And as you said, you know, how do you eat an elephant, is it? Yeah. Bit by bit, I love that. Or bite by bite? Okay, bit by bit. Yeah, we're gonna adopt that one. And you know, looking at how you're building those long-term strategies to capture more information, and then again, building a roadmap so that you can understand how to leverage other AI technologies to support those initiatives.
And just to jump into what you said, I think, you know, a lot of my work as well is working on AI, because I have a background in marketing and media. So right now I'm working AI and ensuring that people understand, you know, how to use AI. I'm actually going to start teaching it at some university in Toronto. So just to go back to what you say, you know, technologies can help us in terms of like identifying the data. She mentioned that she worked in HR before, she has a background in data, and she knew from all this time that the data is here. Why are you guys not implementing this data? And this is the world that we live before the implementation of AI tools and all that. What's going to happen in the next world where we're going to start implementing those AI tools? Those AI tools will be modeled without the thought of minority, diverse thought. They will be modeled around that because those data, we're not looking at it anyways, right? So they will be building that. So it's so important that, you know, if you have a data background, to start getting into the rooms, and even if you don't have a data background, but it's also important to start being in the room where those AI models are being discussed, how this is going to, because tomorrow they might, you know, police us. We don't even know what are those different tools that are being built or going to be implemented. So the best thing that we can do for ourselves, that's why for me, I'm interested into the subject, because this subject is around my life and I want to be involved as much as, you know, politics and all that. So that's the first way to address the technologies and in the diversity. The second way is, you know, we have the platforms like Twitters and TikTok. Those are the biggest platforms that diverse people, well, Black people and all diverse people use in order to have the voice heard. George Floyd, everybody used the tool to ensure that our voice is being heard. So in today's world, a lot of organizations are scared to be dragged online, right? So those tools are there for people to document the journey. And, you know, the more people use this tool, that's how a trend is formed. So we have this tool that has been helping diverse thought to have the thought heard beyond the organization and beyond a space. And the the last implementation of technology in diversity and inclusion, I think for me, before becoming an entrepreneur, as I mentioned to you earlier, I was working for a company, and for me, it was so draining to always be the only black girl. And when I was even in a room, it's almost like I knew I had the best idea because I thought about this idea. Like, I thought about this like for days, right, before presenting it. So when I present the idea, it's so hard for you to, okay, I'm sharing my ideas, but it's not, they're not judging you based on your idea, they're judging based on how you look. So for me, you know, being in a space, as much as you're going to have diversity inclusion program here and there, I just didn't feel comfortable. And that's when I realized that, you know what, if I'm not gonna be able to work remotely, I want to be an entrepreneur. I eventually wrote the remote working program for BMO after that. Sorry for another days. But what I wanted to say is that technology like remote working, once we start being able to work remotely, if you talk to a lot of gender diverse people, or just even diverse people, they're so happy that they are able to work in an environment where they feel safe, which is their home, and facing the workplace, right? So I think that big change after the pandemic and the ability of being able to work remotely and using those tools, those technology has really helped diverse people to feel included as much as they could, because now they just feel comfortable from a perspective of, you know, working in a safe environment.
Of course, of course. I think each of you ladies have touched on data. That has been a very, very kind of strong point in this, is actually data, understanding, knowing what you're working with, understanding your staff, understanding your colleagues. What are our diversity numbers? Do we have an entire department that is filled with visible minorities and then another department that isn't? That department is probably the decision-making department, right? So maybe we need to actually switch things up here. We need to look at future opportunities. But with that being said, taking that data and looking at future trends, future opportunities, and what that data, what us analyzing that data and bridging the gap or implementing strategies to bridge that, what that actually looks like. So that brings me to my next question. What are future trends of EDI in the tech space and then in industries across Canada? You want to take the lead? Well, then back to you.
Okay. So what I've seen, generally, what I've seen is that more and more organizations now, they are aware. They are establishing programs. However, again, it's not intentional. It's just the checklist. And this is what we need to break. It is not a checklist. It has to be intentional. You cannot have everything. Start with small steps. Focus on 2 or 3 points and then move forward. So generally, this is what we're seeing. However, another thing that we're saying, and now I'm really talking about boards of direction, is that we have data that shows that we don't have a lot of women in boards. We don't have a lot of people from diverse background in boards. However, once we have that person, unfortunately, it's more like a token that we have, and we don't necessarily give that person tools in order for them to succeed. So they're left alone. It's as if we throw you in the jungle and you have no weapon. So go and deal with the jungle. And then afterwards, that person as well has the responsibility for an entire group on their shoulder. Nobody can carry that load. It's just too much. Nobody can carry that load. So organization, again, they have to be sensitive about this, to be intentional. And once you promote somebody, give that person tools. Unfortunately, if I think about my personal, my personal life, there's some mistakes that I've made as a professional. I was thrown under the bus. But if a fellow colleague, Caucasian, fortunately, sorry, was doing the same thing, it's just a mistake, be fine, be all right. So again, it's still there. So what do we do? Where do we go from there? You do this with your sleeves, you work harder, you work better, you find allies. Not everybody needs to look alike. Okay? By the way, if you're in a room and everybody looks alike, there's a problem. There's a problem. Okay? You need allies. You need people that will support the cause, that doesn't look like you, but that will be an advocate for you. So when you're not in the room, that person will talk for you and will open the door for you. But once that door is open, as I mentioned, you need to lead the way for others. That's why those programs, internship, mentorship, are very important. We need to help. And also, we need to give people the tools. It's not just to put somebody in a chair, but are we giving that person all the tools in order for that person to succeed? And now what we're saying is no. We saw a lot of great leaders regarding the last months. They fell, and they were alone. So what are we doing for those people? Right. So again, we have that responsibility. If we put somebody, that person cannot be just a number, and we need to give that person the tools in order to succeed. And again, to all of you who are the only one in that position or the only one in your company, you don't have to carry that load alone. You're not alone. It's too heavy to carry it alone. So we need to have that, how do we say it in French? But it's a group, to be there for one another, so you make sure that you're not alone in that journey, and that if you have a question, well, somebody's there. You can call and she will give you the answer. Or you can call him and he will give you the answer. So you're not alone in that journey.
Of course, of course. So looking at some future trends, in that case, it would be a lot more collaboration, right? A lot more allyship. Actually being able to walk into a room regardless of how everybody looks, because as you said, if everyone looks like you in the room, there's a problem. And so being able to actually take that information, take that allyship and grow, putting people from diverse backgrounds into leadership positions to make decisions on behalf of that organization, right?
And give them the tools. Not just put them there, but give them the team, give them the tools, the mentorship, in order for them to succeed, because their success is your success as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can I just, I was just going to jump into what she said, because, okay, so for me, again, I'm here to share my experience. So the first time I was on the board, a board of an organization was actually the United Nations Association of Canada. I was very young, I was maybe 21, and they got me on board as a youth voice, and I made sure I used my voice properly. And back then again, I was like 21, like I was like a young girl out here. I didn't really know, how deep it goes and how it's important for me to be there. I didn't really know that I was like breaking barriers. I had no idea. I just happened to be there because I did some volunteering for them for 4 years, and they asked me and they voted me in, and I got in. So that was my first experience up until my last experience. So like Ernest mentioned earlier, I was recently appointed as, I'm the first black woman to actually join this board, and it's a public media board. So the Francophone Television of Ontario, TFO. So when I got the position, I didn't really know how important this nomination was until I started meeting people from this organization that will come up to me and say, oh, wow, they're so happy to see me in this position. And then I put myself into the shoes, back into these ladies. Back then, remember I was telling you, I was by myself, the only black girl in the room. And when I was looking at the board of directors, there was no one that was black, right? So it's so important that when you are in this room, and even if you feel like sometimes, what Madeleine mentioned, it's a great way, but that's like when you have you found out who your allies are, and you brought them into your sense. But when you're still navigating and still looking at this space, who are my allies, you feel like you have that burden that's on your shoulder. And for me, the best way for me to address that burden is just to ensure that when I'm in a room, even if I'm the only person who looks like myself, I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. And that's what I've been doing. And I think, when I was on the board, the first thing I was too scared to be like a token. And what I love is like my chair, the chair of our board, Mr. Jean Lipine, made me sure that, Christine, you're not here as a token. Anything you need to say, you better say. We go in meeting and sometimes I'm holding things like, Christine, you're holding something. Just share it with us, and I will just really share it. So I'm just so happy to find those allies within my board of directors that really allow me to ensure that I'm able to express myself to a way that sometimes some of the ideas that I brought are aligned with the government of education, the Ministry of Education. All of that to just really say that, you know, you will be giving this chance at some point in your life, whether it's to take a lead, whether it's to be a board, whether it's to even volunteer. So it's up to you. I like to say that the future trends in that space, it's going to be intersectionality. Like what we're doing right here, we're doing intersectionality of Black women in digital media and the tech. So it's really important for you to say, okay, I might be here, but she's right in front of me. What are the things that, you know, we have in common? Is it the industry that we're working in? This is something, what are the things that is worth fighting all together and bringing our individuality and who we are into this space and fighting for a bigger cause? So that's kind of how I'm always looking at when I look at the project, bringing an intersectionality lens so that everybody will feel included, but it will still be specific to a particular audience.
Yeah, definitely. So deeper collaboration would be one of the future trends. Javier, did you want to?
Yeah, for me, I do see a decrease in organizations prioritizing equity and diversity. So I think it's important for all of us to ensure that we're advocating and speaking up and pointing out to whoever's in charge that it's an important cause and feat, and we need to ensure that the policies that are in place reflect all of us. So it's sad to see the lack of prioritization in organizations now that the media frenzy is over, but we all have to continue pushing to ensure that that agenda remains a priority.
Of course. Miranda, did you want to?
I'm sorry, I'm just going to jump in on that because you're making a great point. The decade for African descent in Canada is ending this year. So it means that we won't be the flavor of the month of the year. Is it? It's extended?
Yeah,
okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Because I was scared about that. Thanks. Because again, is it just the conversation of the year, of the month, of the decade, or is something that is there to stay? As a mother, I always say, if my kids have to go through the same things that I'm going through, it means that I didn't succeed in what I was doing.
Right.
Yeah, these are all great points, and I definitely agree. I think DEI, especially after the murder of George Floyd, all these organizations jumped on, unfortunately, what felt like a bit of a bandwagon of we care about DEI, we're going to hire all these people, put them in tokenist roles, not support them, they're going to fail, and then we're going to blame them for failing. And then, as to your point as well, we're now seeing DEI kind of not as popular of a discussion. And I think where we've seen organizations succeed, and which I would say is almost the new phase of DEI, is where we're not seeing it as this siloed effort, but instead embedded into business functions. So right now when we see DEI, it sits within HR. There's like one person that does it for like a 10,000 person company. How's that gonna work? And then, but where it's succeeding is when we're, again, seeing it embedded. So if I give an example, and we were talking about this with AI and products and services, has any women in the room ever tried to connect to their Bluetooth in their car, and then it doesn't connect? And then maybe a man in the car connects to the Bluetooth and it works just fine, and how frustrating that is? That's not because of your voice. That's because the organization that was building testing data didn't include women's voices. Now, if you have an accent, your voice probably won't connect to Bluetooth as well. Again, that's not because of your fault. It's because the organization didn't prioritize DEI in the products, in the services that they built. So I think the new wave of DEI is not just this HR function, which is obviously very important, something that we also need to support, but it's looking at how do we embed it into the products, into the services that we offer, and then how do we tie DEI back to driving business performance and value. So you're creating almost like a shared value model. Doing good is also good for business. And I think that needs to be part of the conversation when we're talking about the new age of DEI to make sure that it's sustainable.
Definitely.
And if I might add to that, what's interesting is that we see that new companies, startups, it's not a question. It's implemented in everything that they do. And we have a program at Groupe 3737 for the youth. It's incredible to see that for them, it's natural. So again, established companies, it has to become natural. And again, as you mentioned, it's not just an HR thing. It's a company thing. It's part of our values. It's part of a core business in order to implement and that everybody feels comfortable, not only in the company, but as well as our clients, that they can see themselves in our company as well. Because we noticed, again, data have shown that there's public companies that they serve society, the community. But when you look deeper, not even deeper, but when you just look at the numbers and you look at the range, the different nationalities for the employee, it doesn't reflect the society. So there's a problem.
Right, definitely. These are all some amazing, amazing answers, some amazing insight. We're just scratching the surface, right? So we've talked about some of the biggest challenges, identifying what those challenges look like. We talked about how technology can actually assist in improving some of those challenges, seeing the data, actually implementing that. And then we talked about the future trends, future results of identifying the challenge, implementing programs or practices or policies in your organization to improve that. But now kind of looking at EDI as you did mention that it was not necessarily a priority for all organizations. A lot of the time when cutbacks are happening, EDI is the first place that the cutbacks are happening because it doesn't necessarily reflect sales. It doesn't necessarily drive business forward in its just authentic self as EDI. So what are some things that companies can do to bridge the gap in EDI, and what are some red flags that most companies do, or a lot of companies do, that you can kind of think of to just avoid when you're trying to actually bridge that gap? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can start. So, I mean, I think it ties back to our conversation around data, right? So many DI professionals or people in that space, I think, struggle with that ability to tie back what they're doing to outcomes. So again, like any other business domain, if you can't prove the value of what you're doing and you don't have strong KPIs or metrics to say why what you're doing is adding value to the business, most likely your role will be cut or be part of a layoff cut. So I think when organizations are looking at driving DEI, they need to tie it back to something. So looking at turnover, okay, so that's an easy one. Are we noticing that there's a higher turnover rate of people of color? What does that cost to the business? And most organizations to bring in, for example, people of color, it's a higher cost for talent acquisition. So losing that individual is a higher cost to the organization. Most, honestly, DEI professionals aren't showing that data and those KPIs and showing how maybe their engagement strategies are keeping people at their organization for longer and saving the organization money. Another piece as well is we were talking about embedding it into product. So if I have a product that only represents or is only applicable to 50% of the community, and I can now increase that product and access a larger market because I'm employing strategies like DEI, I make the company more money, right? That's simple. So showing that. An example, we were working with an organization that does beverages, let's just say. And they were challenged with this because their product, everyone can drink this beverage, but was only appealing to a certain demographic. So they said, we're losing a lot of market share because we want to now appeal to this larger demographic, and we need to look at our advertising, our marketing strategies. We need to understand why our product doesn't resonate with this diverse community. And now we need to do that because why? They want to make more money, right? And they want to drive more sales from that perspective. That doesn't mean that you're doing unauthentic marketing, but it means that you're trying to understand the community so that you can better serve the community with your products and services, which again ties back to that shared value model. And then going back to some of your areas around red flags, I think the biggest red flag that I see at organizations is when they try to leverage their employee resource groups to drive all their DEI initiatives as a side of the desk initiative, and expect them to be able to make that change. I would say that's probably the #1 big red flag that I see. But I'd love to hear from you guys as well.
Yeah, one thing that we noticed, and I always say it's a red flag, is when you have one minority in the company, and that minority has to represent everything. So when it's Black History Month, hey, hey, you know, when it's time to do the corporate picture, hey, hey. So that's a no-no. That person cannot be used in all those tasks, but when it's time to give a promotion, however, that person is disappearing from the list. So again, companies need to be aware of that. Another red flag is what I mentioned before, the checklist. EDI cannot be seen as a checklist. It has to be intentional, and unfortunately, it is still a checklist for company. We have to do this, 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 and that. Okay, we have 4 people from diverse backgrounds, so we're good for this year. Yes, but those people, where are they in the scale, in the range of jobs? Where are they? Are they all in the bottom? If they are, there might be a problem regarding that. So again, it's not just a checklist. You need to be intentional, and you also need to give the tools to the people in the company in order to be aware. I think that education is key. Unfortunately, we don't talk. Yes, we've been talking about it, and may he rest in peace, George Floyd helped with that. And it's sad to say that somebody needed to die in order for us to be aware of certain things. I think it's very sad. However, if we look at the glass more full than empty, we're still having that conversation. However, that conversation needs to be more direct. That conversation needs to be more concrete, and we need to change also the KPI. The KPI that we're using now to evaluate companies need to evolve. They need to see EDI as something that is important and that will help the company achieve their goals. Studies have shown when you have people in your organization that are from diverse backgrounds, 35% in terms of an increase in sales, in revenues that we see in companies. So it does have a value. However, they don't know. And when you're talking to a CEO, number talks. So when you're able to prove those numbers, they will change, because at the end of the day, they want their bottom line, their figures to make sense. So we need, again, to change the KPIs. We need to do more to continue the conversations regarding that in order to make sure that, again, talking about my kids, when they are in the workforce, we won't be talking about this anymore. It has to end at some point.
So I'm just going to add into this. I'm not trying to be pessimist or anything like that, but I feel like EDI in the workplace, EDI without accountability, without them being able to say, hey, here are the number. I'll give you an example. This ex-manager, we've seen that this person has been firing some couple of people. Let's look at the demographic of the people that person has been firing. And if we see a certain trend, then it's our time now to address with that manager to know that, sometimes I feel in company, as much as policy that you want to create, if you're not putting accountable your leaders, you're enabling this culture of non-inclusion, and then you have this EDI, you have this moment, yay, we're so inclusive, we're doing this, we're doing that, but at the end of the day, you're not putting your leaders accountable for when they are, they're making other people not feel included, when they're making decisions that are based with unconscious biases that leads to firing, that leads to people not feeling included, that leads to your hiring practices that is seen that why is your department not that inclusive, right? So there's different ways, and for me, I think that, we are going to keep talking about it unless we start having those leaders accountable for the energy they brings in into this organization. Until we address that, those are the elephant that needs to be eaten alive, if you ask me. And the second thing is, we talked a lot about embedded inclusive solution through like what I like to call inclusive innovation strategy, whether it's looking at this company operational system from a hiring perspective to the service, to customer service, to even how we build a certain product. And that takes, I guess, someone like her or myself who have our own consulting agency that is so unique in doing what we're doing because we're able to address all of this. And now when we have clients, most of my clients, it comes in, hey, Christine, we are doing this and we want to appeal to a certain audience. What are the things that we should be doing? And I come up with campaigns that are going to ensure that it meets all those different needs. So it's a business for us. So I'm not going to be like, everybody needs to be included. It's also business for people like me and her, because now we looked at this space and we found ourselves that, we have this sweet spot there that we can address certain things that we know that they don't necessarily have in the organization, because we have one person that does diversity and it's for everything. Whereas today and how the trend goes, we need to look at the diversity from a product standpoint, a customer standpoint, like a visibility, your brand presence, and this and that. It take an entire organization in order to do that. So going back to your question, and your last question was around the red flag in organization. I think the way I stand on, because if you knew me before the pandemic, I was so, I'm still like that, but I was just so emotional with everything that's happening. It was in the way that, because I felt that I had to carry this load of, being diverse and this and so far, and I felt like I was alone most of the time. But then I started realizing that I need to stop giving my time to the company that does not align with my value. I don't need them. They don't need me. There's so many organizations out there, and it's also up to you when you make your choice to go into company. Don't go into an organization just because you want the money. Like, you're gonna get the money, and for me, what's most important is my peace of mind and my mental states. So I will look into those red flags. The first red flag is, how many diverse people do they have into the company? I look into the board of directors, look into people there, look into Glassdoor, all of the different reviews that they have. If I knew someone there, so for them to really give me the peace of mind of the culture of the companies. For me, the culture is very key, and that's what I will look into. But at the end of the day, for me, I decided I'm not going to go into places that they don't want me in. Because if I go in a place that they don't want me in, I'm going to fight all my life to belong. No, I don't want to be in a place that I have to fight for me to belong. I want to be in a space that from the onset, they want me to belong. And once I'm there, I'm existing, I'm belonging, and I'm being myself.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I wanted to add, one of the red flags that I see, oftentimes companies forget that mental health piece. It's difficult to be a Black woman, to be a part of an equity-seeking group, not only at work, but external to work, just being a human being, walking in the mall, all these sorts of things that we have to deal with. So implementing those tools, those wellness and mental health tools for employees to have access to in your workplace. A lot of organizations tend to forget that important piece, and you'd see less people calling in sick or going on sick leave, or even quitting altogether and trying to understand, why did this person leave? I thought they were happy. So having that mental health and wellness embedded into the organization is key, especially for equity-seeking groups.
I completely agree with that. I think, we don't talk about intersectionality enough and the overlapping forms of discrimination that people face, especially in the workplace. And so many times, as a huge red flag, we'll see organizations be like, I'm going to create a, mentorship program for Black women. And you're like, that's interesting. Because my needs are different than your needs, are different than your needs, are different than your needs. And bucketing us all into one group is
strange, I always thought. So I agree. I think like that's a huge red flag for organizations that aren't thinking and considering intersectionality components.
Definitely. So a lot for people leaders and people in positions of power in their organizations to consider, right? We want to identify those red flags so that we can turn them into green flags. We can make sure that we can kind of flip the script and start to actually make a difference. And treating our staff like people, right? At the end of the day, everyone has different challenges, right? It's tough to be a woman. It's tough to be a visible minority. It's tough to be a man. It's tough to be a human in 2024, right? So let's treat people the same way that and acknowledge that. We've done a very deep dive into organizations and people leaders. Let's switch and talk more about entrepreneurship. So the Changing the Narrative program aims to help bridge the gap between women entrepreneurs. What are some tools, resources, or supports that women entrepreneurs can use, can kind of receive to actually help support their entrepreneurial journey, their business? Can you guys speak to that a little bit?
Yes, I'll be glad to start that conversation because, as you know, Group 3737, Group 3737, we're an incubator and accelerator now since January 2022 throughout Canada. So Winnipeg, Calgary, Halifax, Moncton, Toronto, Quebec. We're there. We're there to support. And what we've seen is that there's a raise in the number of women that are starting businesses. In all our programs, we see that there's more women from diverse backgrounds that are starting or thinking about starting the business. And it's a good time to be Black and start a business now, because there's a lot of programs that are offered because there are tackling some challenges that women in entrepreneurships face. For instance, there's some funds that are dedicated to the Black community. So there's FACE Coalition that offers loan regarding that. In Quebec, we have EVOL, which is, again, another organization that offers funds, and they have a specific fund for Black women because, again, they know that Black women, they face challenges in terms of credit, in terms of type of businesses that they're starting. Sometimes they're just starting a business on the side. They don't necessarily want to leave. They don't necessarily want to leave their job. They want something on the side in order to help the family money-wise, and then afterwards they just notice that it works, so they're like a bit caught by surprise, and they decide to invest themselves completely in that business. So again, there are funds, there are programs. If you have a day, I could give you the list of the programs, but let's just say that there are tools now in order to help, not only in terms of financing, because we know that one of the challenges that people in general face when they want to start a business, it's in terms of money, it's finance. So now there are funds that are available. However, there are less VCs for Black women or for Black in general. So general funding, yes, but again, VC, so when you're ready to thrive and you need that extra push, unfortunately, we're seeing a lack of VCs. But in terms of funding, in terms of programs, there are different cohorts. If you are in retail, there are programs. If you are in tech, there are other programs. So afterwards, if you want, we can talk about it, and I'll give you the list. I have them on top of my head, but let's just say that it's a good time to start a business because there are tools. When I started my business in 2016, I remember I went to the bank, and they asked me if my husband did agree with my business. I was like, what? I have an MBA and you're talking about my husband? Well, I don't get it. But these days, now, thank God, we don't have those type of conversation, and you're able to get funds. If your business plan is not quite okay, there are funds for that. If your credit is not up to point, there's still funds for that. So yes, it's a great day to start business. So if you want to start a business, please see me afterwards, and I'll help you definitely. Yeah. But the glass is full regarding entrepreneurship. The glass is full. And as you can see, I'm passionate about it because it is fun.
It's definitely not my domain, entrepreneurship, but what I would say in any industry is that visibility, networking, ensuring that you let everybody know what you're doing, when you're doing it, how you're doing it, and just meeting people and getting your name out there. So that would be my suggestion.
Definitely. You ladies want to build on that? Entrepreneurship, some tools, resources, supports.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that, especially when you're starting. I mean, when I started my business, it was so overwhelming of just the things you find out. Like, oh, I didn't know payroll worked that way. Like you know, and like all of those things. So I think it's like finding that, like the resources, the support that can get you there, as well as like definitely looking at government loans, especially if you're a product-based organization. It's crazy what some of the loans are out there for you. I think it's also looking at some of the resources at some of the universities. You can bring in co-op students and get rebates on that, you know, for a huge amount. A lot of now the banks are offering special loans for, they have specifically Black funds to get access to loans, although there are challenges with commercial banks, so that's another topic. Yeah, and then it's using your network and seeing how you can leverage and get support. I think, though, it is important to mention there are resources, but it is a journey, and really recognizing that, like, you won't figure it out on day one, right? And each stage you go is like a new milestone, and there's going to be new things. And you're like, okay, then what's the new resources that I need to find to support those things? And you'll get to the next milestone, and you're like, I have that figured out, but now there are new things. So it's always making sure you're being aware of some of those resources available to you to get started.
So as we talk about women in entrepreneurship and the challenges, like I myself, I'm a product of, like, I started my entrepreneurship, you know, really out of, like, you know, I was just kind of tired of, like, you know, after that last experience, like, I didn't want to be in an environment which I can't control. I didn't want to be in an environment which I feel like I couldn't strive. So I wanted to create a space and an environment for myself. So that's kind of how I started my entrepreneurship. So I had a platform, a startup, it's called Africa Hacks, which we kick off in 2020, and up till right now, it's still active, but that startup was a tech startup. The whole idea with that startup was to provide innovation challenges, bringing students together that will answer SDG goals through, like, you know, a digital innovation using AI and whatnot. And then I started my company, and, you know, I feel like we can have an idea of what we need, and it's great to have these targeted programs that, you know, address some of the challenges that like diverse women face when they launch the startups or the business. But for me, I think the biggest challenges that we face is to be sustainable. So, for example, for me, I've been sustainable since 3 years, but I won't say that I was sustainable when I initially started in the first 2 years. A lot of people, they start the business, but they still have the full-time job on the side. But now we have to look at it, because I feel like if I'm gonna start a program, and if I want to look into this program 5 years from now, we have to look at, okay, those 50 women started our program. 5 years from now, they're sustainable, they can live from the business, and that's when I will know that this program that is being built for me is working, it's efficient, because they're receiving millions of dollars to implement them. And those $1 million can also be distributed in terms of a bigger share of the money directly to these entrepreneurs. Well, we still have to go to the mentorship and all that. But so for me, I'm like, you know what? If you guys are receiving millions in order to create a program, it better be sustainable. It better work. We better create not just like starting businesses, but business that can thrive and that can, you know, that can lead. So for me, that's kind of like my take into. I also write a business program for entrepreneurship, and I always ensure that if I do that, and that's why I want to get my master in entrepreneurship from Smith University. If I do that, I'm providing these women with the exact framework and the tool that they need in order to build a profitable business. At the end of the day, my keyword is, how do you make money? bring me all the ideas that you bring in the world, but how do you make money and are people buying your products?
Right.
Because you do all of this thing and these women leave the space and they still don't know how to sell, they still don't know how to make money. So what exactly are we doing, right? So for me, the biggest challenges for these women is to ensure that they sign up for group concept program, for example. They sign up for programs that you see there's a real impact into what you're doing. So that's why, for example, for me, I don't really go to a lot of programs unless there's the money behind it, then that's my motives, honestly.
Knowledge. You go to those programs to get knowledge too, because knowledge is key. Because what you're saying in terms of making sell, because that's one thing also when we have meetings, personalized coaching with companies, we're like, okay, what is your bottom line look like? You know, how do you make money? Because sometimes they have that all great idea in terms of marketing, but at the end of the day, do you sell? And what is, you know, the journey in order to get that sale? And if you're not able to sign contract, if you're not able to sell, then you don't have a business. You know, so you need to get that knowledge. If I'm going
to join that program and that knowledge, I'll give you an example, right? Because I write programs too. So I write a program, even if it's like $200, I will allocate to even go to my HubSpot so that whenever you do, you tell me, I can go and implement it right away and on the spot so that I don't have this knowledge and I have to hold it in my head and wait for when the money comes in and I can implement it. So for me, I believe in, even if it's $500 that you take that money and you put it back directly into your business, into paying this platform, because the platform are not free, you still have to pay for this platform. So you have an entrepreneur that are here she's still striving. Maybe she has one kid, she needs to, care for the kid, care for herself, and now I'm joining this program. So for me, I think it's very important, and I say it because, again, my background is into looking into something like that, but at the end of the day, for especially a woman, if she's going to lose 2 hours of her days, she needs to give, even if it's like $100, like she needs to get paid for that hour that she loses into this day, because I don't know, for me, that's my perspective. And, I'm not trying to say anything, but that's my perspective because, again, I've been doing this and myself, and I'm an entrepreneur. And for me, it's very key important because for me, and again, this is someone who has a background in business and has a background in like growing startups and all that. So maybe that's why it's a bit different. But I've spoke to other women. It's also, they will definitely take all those like free, it's important to take those free networking. But the key turning point of their career is when they will take something where they have a certain amount of money that they can put back into the business at the same time they get the information and put back into the business. Then now they can see, oh, okay, I was able to implement it, and now I'm seeing growth and I'm seeing all of this. That's kind of like
definitely
the challenges.
Yeah, you have to spend money to make money, but ensuring that it'll be worth it in the end. Definitely. So a lot of good advice for women entrepreneurs in the room. There's something that you mentioned, Madeleine, and I want us to dive deeper. I think we're probably at the ocean floor right now, but we're going to keep going. So in the world today, you mentioned venture capital funds. So in the world today, about 90 to 98% of all venture capital funds are awarded to men. In Canada specifically, women apply at a much lower rate. So obviously it is relative, but the women do apply at a much lower rate. We're only awarded about 4% of venture capital funds. So what are some actionable steps that the venture capital industry can take to address this gender disparity and ensure equitable access for women entrepreneurs?
Good. Yes, excellent point. And one of the things that we've done is that if it doesn't exist, you create it. So now there's the Firehood Fund that is there. Actually, Claudette McDowan, who is based in Toronto, is one of the founder of that fund. So they helped women, and we have women that apply for that fund. They're part of the Startup Fest. So you pitch and you're able to get that fund. So one of the things is that if it doesn't exist and they're not willing to do it, then you do it yourself. So that was one of the solutions. However, part of the solution is to talk about it. Right. To talk about it. In Quebec, we have Ange Québec. Ange Québec, again, they are venture capitalists, so they're supposed to help companies. And the CEO was saying, Madeleine, I don't see your companies. And I was like, yeah, but because you don't invite them. So I was, okay, yeah. So for them to pitch, they need to be in the room. So if they're not in the room, again, they cannot pitch. And remember what I said before, EDI, it's not just to be invited, but you can dance as well, and you feel comfortable to dance. So it's the same thing. If you're not invited, if when there's a pitch contest, you are not aware of it, or it doesn't, you're not invited in it, or nobody that is member of the jury is aware or has that sensibility regarding minorities or people from diverse background, then it's going to be status quo. It won't change. So again, what we've done, and we've took concrete steps regarding that, it's to talk to them. For instance, last week I was in Quebec City, and we have that summit for all accelerators, and we had VCs in the room. What did I do? I went to all of them, and I pitched to all of them, and they were like, oh, Madeleine, I didn't know you were doing that. I didn't know you had entrepreneurs. So again, yes, I could have blamed that. How come you don't know us? It's been 10 years. And I was like, it's okay. We still have work to do. So again, I think that raise awareness, but to be there, to go to those events, to talk to them. I went to LinkedIn, and I was like, okay, I need to talk to this person, this person. So I do my homeworks too before I go there. So when I go there, I have a plan. I know that I'm going to talk to so-and-so, and sometimes they're like, oh, my God, you know me better than I know myself. I was like, yes, I made my studies. I know that usually you invest in this, and that, and last year you invested in this, and that. So I have a company that has those requirements for this, and that. And they're like, oh, okay. And that's it. The rest is history. But that's how you change things. Right. You see the problem, you're part of the solution. One thing that we did, we created a fund, and there are other funds that are coming. Will Stéagène in Quebec, he used to work at Caisse de dépôt du Québec. Now he's going to raise his own fund in order to help, again, companies from diverse backgrounds. So that's one of the solutions. But the other solution is to talk to them. To talk to them, and, you know, you talk, the hammer approach, you know, you talk. After that, they're going to be tired to see you, and they're going to maybe run when they see you. But at the end of the day, it will change. And again, I see the glass half full because I see that it's starting to work. We have at the Startup Fest, there's again a pitch contest, and there are VCs that are investing in people from diverse background, entrepreneurs from diverse background. There's a specific price dedicated for entrepreneurs from diverse background. Is it going to solve everything? No, but baby steps. Yeah. And slowly we'll run there.
Exactly, definitely.
I'm just going to jump into it and just make me remind myself of, you know, of two things. The first thing, you know, we talk about VC, and we obviously, I think we're all aware of the Fearless Fund, what's happening in the US. So we know that in the US, 1% of the VC funds allocated every year goes to Black women. And of those 1%, we're talking about $288 billion invested every year, and 1% goes to Black women. And in that regard, her name is Simone. She created a Fearless Fund in Atlanta. And when she created a Fearless Fund, the whole idea with the Fearless Fund was to address that data point that I just gave you, and ensure that when they raise funds, they give it back to this community. And what happened? A group of conservatives down there block her funds, and right now her fund is being held up in court as I speak, and she's not able to do it because they realize that in some perspective, you know, based on the law, you will say that, you know, she's not allowed to create a fund that's specifically geared towards a specific community. But at the same time, if other people have been playing the same game and investing into their own community without including other community, and now she's addressing this gap that is being created. So this is the conversation that's happening in the States, and this conversation is pushing people to really think about, you know, what exactly is been happening. And I will say the first solution, a little bit like what Madeleine said, you know, in order to bridge the gap, that's VC gap, is you actually have to be part of the conversation. So I mentioned earlier I was working for an investment fund when I was younger. I'm still young. A couple years ago, and the one thing that they were not investing into diverse and minority companies. They were investing into companies that are well known, that are owned by Caucasian. So I always ask, because I was in the investment room, I was in the strategy team. I was always asked, why don't we change strategy and da 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 da. At the end of the day, like also Miranda mentioned earlier, it's all about, especially for these investment people, it's all about are they making money, right? And that goes back into what I said earlier. It's great to form a bunch of entrepreneurs, but are they making money? Because at the end of the day, this making money process is going to come back later on when we're going to start investing into your business. Are you making money? And if you're not making money, what is the plan and what is the strategy that you're taking in order to make money? So which brings me to my last point. In order to be the change in these spaces, you have to be the change. Like Madeline mentioned that, whenever she goes into a meeting, she looked into the LinkedIn, everybody, she has a strategy, and I have the same strategy too. Whenever I go somewhere, and depending on what exactly is my objective, I know that I'll have to talk to everybody until they become sick of me. So at the end of the day, we also have this ability for us to step in, as she mentioned, she stepped in an investment scene, stepping in that investment space and say, hey, I also want to raise funds. I also want to be part of the conversation. So then now you come in with your portfolio of successful entrepreneurs that are ready for investment. So I think the solution, I think it will be if more of us are part of this conversation, if more of us raise funds, we are now going to be part of the conversation, because let's be honest, Black people, especially minority people, we're playing catch up right now because there was this ecosystem that was happening behind the scene that we had no idea about because we thought that we were included, right? So because we start addressing the elephant in the room, and somehow that's how you eat the elephant, right? Because you start understanding the strategies that goes behind, and we start playing the same game. And I know earlier when I mentioned the Fearless Fund, yes, you're gonna have people that's gonna say, oh my God, why you want to create such a fund? Because they don't want us to start playing the same game as them. Because if we now start playing the same game with the same rule, who's gonna win? We are gonna win, right?
So I think all of this conversation has been extremely insightful. I have one more question for you ladies, and then we're going to turn it over to the audience for some questions just before lunch. So if you do have a question, we have our lovely moderator right behind here. Please raise your hand, and then she will come over and you can ask your question for the panelists, and then we will go into lunch. I know a lot of people are probably hungry by now. The last question that I have for each of you ladies is, what advice or what would you say to somebody who is wanting to start their own business but they're hesitant because they're from an underrepresented group? What can you leave the audience with?
One thing that I always say, just Nike says, just do it. At the end of the day, just do it. Because unfortunately, women, we need to have the perfect business plan. We need to have the financial statement made by Deloitte. We need to have this and that. Perfection doesn't exist in that world. So the sooner you get into the game, the sooner you'll know if your product or your service fulfill a need. And the sooner you'll be able to adjust yourself. So just do it. It's fun. It's cool to be an entrepreneur. As you can see, I'm passionate about it, even though I made so many mistakes when I started my business. But now I teach others in order for them not to make those mistakes. But please believe in yourself. Do it. Do it. We have the tools. You have the ecosystem that is backing you, but be kind to yourself as well. Be kind to yourself. You will face failure, but at the same time, you will face success. So just do it.
Thank you.
I really like that. I don't know if you can be anything that she just said. I'd say that your ideas, passion, the gap or the need that you see, it matters. So don't be fearful, and like you said, just do it.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I think that was for years I wanted to start a business, and I was like, it has to be perfect before I can do it. And then I was like, what's the worst that can happen? I fail. If I don't do it, then do I fail? But I would also say if you're looking to start your own business, try to secure your first client, like your first paying client, even if that is on the side of your desk, or someone that's willing to co-develop with you, where there's some financial involved, because that will help secure you in your comfort that you can do it, if that's the fear of moving forward from a financial standpoint. And then also, I would say, kind of tying back to some of those resources, understand the resources that are available to you so that when you do go out and you just do it, that you have that support and you don't feel that you're alone in the journey.
For me, it will be to just start it now. Start it afraid. Start it when you send that email and inside your stomach, you don't really know if you should send the email or not. That's when you should start it. Start it with all the butterfly that comes with it. But as long as you start it afraid, don't wait until you're not afraid anymore, because you're always going to be afraid for what you don't know about, right? You're always going to be afraid. I like to say that if I'm not afraid of something, that means that this is not a challenge. That means that I don't even need to do that because I'm not afraid of doing it. So if you are afraid of anything, I would like to say that you have to pursue that thing, because it scares you so much because you don't know what's going to unfold from that. So really start afraid, and also be yourself. Everybody's already taken. Be yourself while doing it. I remember when I started my first website, it was in 2014. I started a website, it was called Flower Hurricane, and it was like a .com. All my friends was like, oh my God, Chrissy, you had a .com. And I remember I built it by myself. And when I did it, a lot of my friends just took my idea and started doing the same thing and having a blog and this and that. And I remember I was so scared because I was like, why are you guys copying me? And the second thing is, once people start copying you, that's when you know that you're doing good. Like, I started realizing, you know what, if people copy me, like, I'm actually very happy. Like, you have nobody else than copying me. Like, thank you, right? So don't be afraid of that, right? Because I used to be so afraid of something like that. So don't be afraid of that. Let people copy you. And like she mentioned earlier, once you have your first client, you have to have a repetitive client. For example, I was telling them earlier, I just landed from Cameroon. I was in Paris and Cameroon yesterday because I have something with my repeated client next week in Montreal. Because they were my repeated clients, I have to move everything around to ensure, and also for this panel, but to ensure that I was going to be here, because it's a client that's keep on coming every year. And for this type of client, you have a different allocation. So find your client and make them come back to you and to you. So for me, I think when you have those like small tactics, it's going to fall into your bigger strategy, and do your business plan. And don't look at the business plan into, you go to those programs like Group 37. That's when, at the very early stage of your time, when you still have the resources, you go and get all those free resources available. Look at the business plan, but don't look at it as, oh my God, it's a business plan, I don't know how to do it. Look at it like this is a business plan of your business, and you can literally make it how you want it to sound, as long as it fits into making money and making profit. Don't look at it as, and don't be afraid, because I think as women all the time, we look at those spreadsheets, we look at, oh God, I'm so afraid. No, don't be afraid. This is so normal. Like, this is your business. Like, you're now stepping into the big dogs, like, the big dogs arena, so you have to be serious, right? Yeah. So look at everything and just be serious about it, but at the same time, it's a journey, so have fun while you do it, because then it's not worth the cause. So yeah, have fun while you do it, and good luck if you want to start your journey in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, such amazing responses. I know that I learned a lot. These women have provided so much insight and so much support. I encourage each of you to connect over lunch and kind of network and have those conversations and dive even deeper into some of the topics that we've discussed. Could we just get a round of applause for these ladies? Thank you. It's amazing. We do have time for a few questions, so if you do have a question, please raise your hand, and our moderator will bring the microphone over to you.
You just give your name and then ask your question, please.
My name is Kim Singh. Thank you very much for what you're doing and your support. I'm an advocate for women empowerment. I focus on D&I at the side. I'm more focusing on the B. For me, belonging is key. Organization, I've spent 30 years in corporate, and I find organization is not looking at the belonging. That place of security, that place when that door is closed, you know your voice is being heard. How do you feel about that? Because we haven't addressed it. I think one of the young ladies mentioned it very briefly, But belonging is so key. I find most of the time I'm the only woman of color that's there, and then I have a list of black people that I want to advocate for. There is no one else to support me but me, and then I have to prove my point as to why it needs to belong instead of being included. So can you help me understand, in your role, in your space, forget about D&I, where does the B, where does the narrative take force in?
So I think I mentioned that belonging part. I think, you know, the way I will answer this question, because to your point, right, like I will go in this company, like I see EDI, this, that, but like where do I be? Like how, like for you to be, you have to be you. That's why I say you have to be yourself. Everybody's already taken. You know your responsibility that you have. Unfortunately, you cannot hire someone else that looks like you. You know what I mean? So, and I think once you start realizing it and accepting this, that's when things are going to be so easy for you. You have to accept that you cannot hire. If you could, you would. But you're not the one making the decision, right? So until you are that person that makes this decision, or if tomorrow you have the chance and you're in a manager position and, you know, you're getting the hiring process and you feel like this person who looks like you, because of also the credential that they brings in, that's how you make the change once you have those positions of the managerial position, and you can bring on people who looks more like you to have a more inclusive space. But until then, unfortunately, you're only one. So the only way for you to be is to be yourself, is to be you. And I think we have this mindset of where we come into places, people want to put you in boxes, and oh my God, I go to cottage. Well, I have a big house in Cameroon with a pool. That's my sort of cottage, right? So I like to say that the way for you to belong is to sharing your culture, sharing your background, so they have an idea of, for me, sometimes when my coworker back in the day used to come to me and say, oh, Christine, like, and they will say, oh, Pascal Siakam. He knows that Pascal Siakam is from Cameroon, so I know that he wants to know a little bit more about my culture, so he made some research around Cameroon, and he found out that the Raptors, former Raptor players, was from Cameroon. So for me, I will always say the best way for you to belong is to share who you are, whether it's through your culture, food, music, entertainment, whatever, books and all that, but it has to be around who you are, and that's how you bring your authentic self to work. I know they always say, bring your authentic self to work, but when I bring my authentic self to work, I'm not included. But like her, you know, what she said earlier, for me, I don't care. I'm still gonna come. Fridays, I used to go on Friday on full African attire, because Friday is the day that is supposed to be chill. So Friday, you will see me wearing my African attire, and I don't really care. You look at me the way you look at me, I don't really care, because I belong here. So for me, belonging is being there with everything that represent myself, whether it's the way I dress or whether it's, you know, we have a potluck and I bring food that represent my culture. So that's how I belong, and that's how I let them know that here I am and this is who I am. Even when you go on vacation back home, oh, I just came back from vacation. Oh my God, how was the vacation? Oh, I went and visited this. Oh my God, I never knew he was in your country. So they always have something to share, or sometimes I'll come back from vacation, and I remember I brought for my past leader, I brought him some pepper, and at first he looked at the pepper and it was like, oh, what is this? But this is like the most expensive pepper in the world. It's called Penja pepper, and it's grown in Cameroon in a volcano. So he never knew about that. So he went around and Googled, said, oh my God, Christine, you really bought me a very expensive pepper. And it's very spicy. I'm like, yes, I knew. So really, it's all about bringing yourself, who you are, and what you want them to remember about yourself. That's how I belong. I just really don't. For me, that's how I belong, and that's how I make sure that people know that I'm here, because they know my story and they know my culture.
And just to add to that, so I agree, like, you have to show up and be yourself, but I think as well, like, everyone in this room, I'm going to just make an assumption that we all believe in DEI and the importance of it, and I think the hardest part about DEI is being able to convince others to believe in it. So sometimes I think the hardest thing to do when you're trying to have those conversations with people where they're maybe not, you know, kind of taking that seriously, of the concerns you're raising around, I feel like I don't belong and that the organization needs to do something about it. It's, again, this is very difficult to do, but it's taking the emotion out of it and then tying back to when I don't feel like I belong, or my team or these members, productivity goes down. you lose as a business. So this is not just a me problem, this is an organizational problem because I'm an employee here. And having that level of conversation, again, about that so that they're seeing it from a different perspective for those. Unfortunately, there's a lot of those that don't get, us, right? And some of those challenges. So I'd encourage maybe trying even a different tactic to get that support.
And if I may add to that, usually, because we do give advice to companies, how do we do that? How do we implement EDI in a company? For me, the B is included in the I. Because inclusion, again, is meaning that you're able to be yourself. And there's a room for you in the company to emancipate yourself, to grow in the company, and you have the possibility to have that voice. Now, in a management point of view, they need to say to their employees, here is how we help you to have that voice. Here is what type of policy that we put into place in order for employees to feel comfortable in the company, to have a say. It's not just go and see HR and ask them to have a culture day in the company once a year. It's not about that. It's other things that we put into place for the employees to feel comfortable, and also the directors, the management, the board, to have the tools to support those employees as well. It goes both ways. But for me, the B is included in the I. If you feel included, if you feel that you can grow in the company, that your voice is heard, then you feel like you belong in the company and that you have something to bring to the table, and that the management sees that you have something to bring in the table as well.
And I just want to add, all great points. Keep on pushing and keep on being that advocate and paying it forward. Many kudos to you.
Yeah, thank you. Next question.
Hi, everybody. My name is Cece. I guess I should stand because I couldn't see the person asking the question over there. So this is not a question. It's more so a statement and just sharing my thoughts, because I strongly believe in sharing knowledge to move forward. So when we're talking about diversity, inclusion, and all those things, and I think a lot of times you go to events, which is wonderful. This is not saying anything bad about any Black events or anything like that. We talk about organizations. We talk about accountability. This is a very unpopular opinion, so Black people, forgive me. We don't often talk about what is our role as an individual. So I kind of wanted to touch on that, even as we learn from everybody here. So if you think of moving and you're standing on a treadmill, you're walking, but you're not going anywhere. And a lot of times we get so frustrated at organizations who are not doing what they need to do. This is not to say that they shouldn't be doing those things, but like in any relationship, we often get frustrated when the other person is not changing. So we should look in the mirror and say, what can I do? So this is my what can I do, and hoping to share this takeaway for everybody. You as an individual, we often look at, I'll say white folks, and look at their pictures and what they're doing. Oh, everybody in your friend group is white. You as a Black person, is everybody in your friend group Black? Because you're not going to learn how systems work if you are not having conversations with people in the systems. I think that is foundational in order for all these other things to happen. I can't show up authentically if I don't know what conversations Tom, John, and Scott are having about Black women. But if I befriend them and I network with them and I learn from them and know what they're talking about, I can then come up with strategies to infiltrate the system. So think of it as a Trojan horse. You have to get into the place in order to destroy the system. But you cannot have an opinion if you don't know the conversations happening there. You can't ask somebody to invest in you if you don't know the conversations investors are having. So this is the diversity inclusion has to be a triangle. The organization, accountability, the organization has to be accountable, but you also are accountable for your own actions. So befriend people, network with people so you know the conversations they're having. So you come to a table with knowledge of how to infiltrate those systems. And then everything else a little bit easier, and you're not hitting against a wall, walking on a treadmill, not going anywhere fast. Just sharing my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll take one more question, and then we will break, I think right behind you, and then we will break for some lunch. But I encourage everybody in this room to have conversations with our panelists, network with each other, and learn and gain a lot more insight. Last question?
Hello. My name is Stella by Design. I'm a designer, I'm a business entrepreneur, and we have to internalize the issues that are facing the Black community right now. It's very industrious of you today to talk about what's going on in the sense of diversity, inclusivity. But as a business owner, I don't see my own people actually proprietorshiping my business. And we're talking about generation of wealth that should be ours. We're one of the first, our ancestors, as you know, this is Black History Month. Our ancestors are the ones who came to these countries and built these countries. And it looks as if we're the ones who are going to be left behind. We have new immigration policies coming here in Canada, inviting people to take over this country. When we are the first people, just like the natives, to actually be the people that built these countries. We have to internalize our predicament. And we have to look at where we're going from here as a nation, as a people. And I don't like to bring these things up, and people are going to think that I'm one of these antagonist type of person. I'm not. I came to the age of 65, where I'm going to be retiring, and I will not be retiring in this country, because this country is not telling us that we belong here. The GTA is not telling us that we belong here in Canada. So I would like to only bring this conversation to people of color is because we have to look internalizing. Where do we stand in this society? Where do we stand in the GTA? And I really bring it upon our people to internalize and find out what is the future of people of color in this country. We only look to the natives who were the original people, and we see that they have had the struggle. We've seen the actual unmarked graves that are here just being brought to our attention by the Trudeau. It's important that we internalize our predicament and look, where do we go from here? I speak to my people because I am passionate about my people. I'm passionate about where do we stand.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry I'm going on and on, but we have to internalize and say, where is the future when it comes to how they want to respect us as a people? Sorry about that.
Thank you. No, of course. So that is the time that we have allotted today. I know that some of you may have additional questions, looking to gain more insight, looking to learn from our panelists, or just make connections. So I do encourage you guys to do that over lunch. If you did have any additional questions that weren't answered up here today, we can continue to engage in that conversation. And it doesn't end here in this room. It starts with all of us, and it starts with us going out into our communities and our home lives and at work and making a difference and impacting these communities. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sade. Thank you. Please, you can just stay here. So thank you, Sade, for leading this conversation. It was really, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give a round of applause for Sade. Thank you. A great moderator. She really nailed the key point. So thank you so much, Madeleine, Christine, Fabienne et Miranda. Merci beaucoup de vous être prêtés au jeu. Thank you so much for giving us all the insight regarding the leadership for the Black women in Canada. We will now ask you please to stand and take picture, before you leave the stage. Just leave your mic and then take picture just close to there. Yes. Coming there to help a little bit. I don't know if Mr. Namir is around. We'll have, yes. The chair, okay. Because we are kind of covering it. Nobody's falling, right? Once again, thank you so much and enjoy your lunch. So ladies and gentlemen, we are not moving forward for the lunch, okay? It's time to get some refreshment. And as you know, our keynote speaker, Ashley Wright, will be entertaining us in the evening. So stay tuned. You just have some time to take lunch, refresh yourself, and then we come back in the room to talk about crypto, money, and then we are looking forward for that, okay? Thank you so much and enjoy your meal. Bon appétit à tout le monde.